Welcome back from coffee, everyone, and welcome to the second session of the morning on building successful projects and collaborations. Despite the challenges that you've heard about in the earlier discussions, there are examples of projects that and partnerships that have worked well, and we wanted to highlight some of them. So this session is on building successful projects and collaborations, and it's a look at multinational collaborative research projects and lessons that can be learned from them. It'll be moderated by Professor Daya Reddy, who's the Vice Chancellor of University of Cape Town. Daya, thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and very good morning to all. We have a session here with three speakers, and I'll introduce them properly just before they speak, but let me indicate now that we have Professor Mano Ramatsindela, and we have Ms. Regina Ombam and Professor Yosua Dambisia. Actually, would you mind joining me in front now, the speakers? Thanks, Mona. Excellent. Thank you very much. Welcome. So colleagues and friends, you know, in a sense, starting at the beginning, collaboration is the lifeblood of intellectual progress, and therefore ultimately of societal progress as well. We talk a lot about collaboration, but think about what it means in particular, that give and take of the creative process that allows us to make progress, to achieve goals that we simply would not be able to do if we were working on our own or within our own insular groups. It's particularly relevant to addressing problems and challenges that straddle disciplinary divides. In those cases, collaboration, or without collaboration, there would be absolutely zero progress. Disciplinary divides and sectoral divides as well, going beyond universities, governments, the private sector, civil society. Well, of course, we know all of this, and in fact, this is why we are part of a network, networks in this case. We heard a great deal this morning about equitable partnerships, and I won't elaborate on that here. As someone once put it, you know, don't just invite somebody to a party, you ask them to dance. And somebody else added, well, and also ask them to help you in choosing the music. So really, fully participatory from agenda setting onwards. With regard to the practicalities of collaboration, equitable partnerships will only work, will only be real partnerships if the partners or would-be partners have the capacity to be able to engage in such collaboration. And so that, I think, is a matter which we should and we do give attention to as well. Collaboration, but also being able to build and strengthen capacity in our different institutions and regions. And this is particularly the case in Africa, where we are still working as a continent towards strengthening intra-Africa collaboration, that is, amongst individuals and institutions on the African continent, then also strengthening global South-South collaboration with colleagues, for example, in South America, Asia, and other parts of the world, in addition to the Global South-North links, of which there are many and which we continue to nurture and to build on. These are all very important. So coming to our session now this morning, it is all about building successful projects and collaborations, and we'll hear from our speakers about successful projects, and we will also be able to discuss and discern from the presentations what it is that we are able to learn. So I'd like to move on now to our first speaker, who is Manu Ramasundela. Manu Ramasundela is Professor of Geography at the University of Cape Town. He also holds the University of Pretoria, University of Cape Town Future Africa Research Chair in Sustainable Transformations, and he's co-director of the Arua Guild Cluster of Research Excellence on the politics of sustainability. Manu is the founding co-chair, together with David Mickler, of the Worldwide Universities Network Global Africa Group. So he has a direct involvement in the activities of the WUN. The group published in 2020 the work Africa and the Sustainable Development Goals. Manu and David Mickler did. So with that, Manu, I invite you to deliver your talk. Thank you.
How much time? How much time?
10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Daya, for the introductions, and good morning, everyone. I asked for time because I could be very passionate about the project, and I could go on and on. I just thought that I would share with you some of the projects. One of the projects that we did as a Global Africa Group of WUN, and to share with you some of the thinking through the SDGs. So I want to start from the output, which most people who work in the group and those who read on sustainable development in Africa would have picked up. The African Sustainable Development Goals, edited volume that was published by Springer in 2020, was a product of the Global Africa Group. But that was the outcome. How did we get there? It's an important part. What is the experience that we can share with you, or with this audience today? So I thought it will be more of experiential learning from the WUN Global Africa Group project. We didn't evaluate ourselves, whether we were successful or not, but most people think we were successful. And the group thought we were successful because they were asking for the second edition. What is the next volume? And so there was a lot of energy, and two of the members who participated actively in that process are in the room. If I misrepresent the group, they have the right to speak. So, going into the discussions here, I thought it will be important to share with you what was in the thought process. The Global Africa Group was launched in 2015, incidentally the same year that the SDGs were inaugurated. But it was a coincidence. We were not taking the SDGs as our point of departure, nor were we thinking about writing a book on the SDGs. What we thought we would do as a group was first to develop principles of collaborations, value propositions for our collaborations. And we did that without the charter. The charter would have made it easier for us. And we had to think about the questions that we needed to address. And this is the the approach to how we would do sustainable development in Africa, given the diversity of regions and countries on the continent. What will then constitute Africa? And that is a question that African studies scholars are still grappling with it today. How does one study Africa? In some ways, traditionally, people study Africa by having their own patch of Africa. Somebody is a specialist on Ethiopia, a specialist on South Africa, a specialist on Ghana, on Uganda, on Nigeria, and so forth. But we thought maybe we need to think about studying Africa differently. And so we had to think about the methodology, about how we would study Africa. So there were three things that we also wanted to deal with in terms of equality, equitable partnerships that we all talk about. But it's thinking about how do we do that? And as the previous sessions has made us aware, we can debate on these things forever. But how do we start doing things differently? So this project, we had three universities on the continent and 20 universities outside the continent. So how do you bring equity into the discussions? Already, in terms of numbers, is skewed. If we were to vote, it means that the Global Africa Group will be outvoted straight away. Okay. So we needed to grapple with that question before we even start with the project. And the second question we grappled with was the relevance of Africa's research and development agendas. Development in Africa has a very long history. And part of that history is agenda setting. And we needed to figure out how we can prioritize Africa's research and development agendas. And how did we do that? By having workshops, a series of workshops in Cape Town, Nairobi, and Ghana. Actually, the group was launched in Ghana. A series of workshops, but we also realized that if we simply use the three universities, that's not going to tap into the wisdom and expertise that's on the continent. So we developed what we call the regional hubs as a methodology. The regional hubs meant that in Cape Town, UCT will serve as a hub for the SADC region and bring in universities in SADC and other partners who are interested in the kind of research that we were doing. Nairobi served as the East Africa hub, and we brought other universities in East Africa to participate because they were not members of WUN. If one thinks about this, we were just trying to increase our numbers in some ways. And in Ghana, Ghana served as the center for West Africa. And you will see in the book, that I'm sure is downloadable now, that there are people who are not members of WUN who have contributed chapters. And that was very useful because it also creates opportunities for regions to begin to connect together as well. Now, regarding the question of inequality, inequalities in higher education and the research sector, I think that was at the forefront of what we were trying to do. So I've given you a sense of what the regional hubs model looked like. And thinking about it now, it may be an approach that African studies scholars might actually want to consider about how we go about studying Africa. But so how did we package the questions then? into, into what ended up as chapters in the book or themes in the book. We did not have a theme that we wanted to write about. So we used the workshops to develop those themes collectively. And by the way, there was no PI for this project. We were trying to engage the steering committee, engage people in the region through these workshops, and we came up with 3 packaging questions, I would call them. And these are Africa's sustainable development approaches, institutions, and agendas. And with agendas, we had to draw on the African Union agenda as well, as part of Africa's agenda for development. We also have to bring in scientific evidence and critical thinking on the SDGs in Africa. So we didn't simply embrace them, we also questioned them in order to really engage with what they might mean for Africa. And the role of collaborative research was key to this. So the project was about what does SDG 17 looks like on the ground? And we came to that after the workshops that we held. So you will see the, sorry, I need to go back. You will see the packaging of these questions. Now, if one thinks about agendas, and we had a discussion in the previous sessions about setting the agendas. The only weakness we had was not to have communities in these regions attending for many other reasons. We tried even to bring the media into the discussions, especially when we were in Nairobi, and bring other stakeholders who might be interested in this. So, after packaging these questions, we then invited scholars to say, you have been doing research, how does your research speak to the SDGs? So in other words, the research in health, research in water, that the colleagues have been doing, we asked them, how does that speak to the SDGs? So we didn't use the SDGs as a starting point, but use them as a mirror to reflect on what Africa development might look like. And that was very useful. It was also inclusive in the sense that people brought their own expertise into the discussions. And we didn't have any way of selecting people who are not working in health or who are not working in water. We say, bring whatever research you've been doing and let us know how it speaks to the SDGs in Africa. So that is the approach that we... But to ensure co-production, which has been spoken about in the morning, we had to insist on one principle, which most of these principles are detailed in the preface of the book, that all the chapters in the book should be written by at least 2 authors, and one of the authors should at least be based in Africa. And so the only way you can exclude people is when they don't have that, when they don't meet that criteria. And we have excluded 1 or 2 people who thought they could just come and present whatever they had. So that's one principle that helped us to try and motivate, to use that word rather than enforce, co-production of knowledge and co-publications. But of course, we didn't monitor with the first author and the second author. We were not thinking much about that. So we had I would say we had a good start. These are just some thoughts that I want to share with you. We had a good start with the principles and values that are now embraced in the African Charter. But what happened to that good start? This was one of the first books on sustainable development in Africa. It is in one of those publications that took advantage of the questions, the global questions of the day. But the question is always, what next? And I think there is a foundation there that we can build on. And I can suggest other ways. The charter is there for us to work with. But SDGs have also been implemented. We are halfway to the 2030 mark. What has happened in Africa with SDGs? How have institutions been impacted by SDGs? How have organizations, funding instruments been impacted by SDGs? How are policies shaped by SDGs? How do government work when they are given SDGs as something to work with? And most governments are trying to implement SDGs for different reasons, including diplomacy, international recognition, and so forth. But what has actually happened? And we need to take stock of that as perhaps an important area of research. But I've got to say something about how this was funded. We didn't apply for the RDF funding. We thought we've got an idea. Is there some slush fund somewhere? I should have checked whether something is being recorded now. I mean, we were just, it was an economy of trust. Okay? This is something that you can run with, see how it works. A very small budget, we had 3 workshops across the 3 regions. What is also important about this project, which might be useful, is that it was supported by the institutions where we held the projects. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana was very supportive, attended some of the meetings. So was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town and University of Ghana. And we have got evidence in the photographs. I've run out of time now, but I'm sure there'll be time for questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Manu. Thank you very much, Manu. We'll take questions and discussion at the conclusion of the 3 presentations. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker. Ms. Regina Ombam is a health financing expert, an economist by profession, with a strong bias in public policy analysis, modeling, strategic planning, infrastructure, health, and development economics. She has over 20 years of professional work experience in health policy and planning, having served in several institutions, nationally, regionally, and at the global level. Regina is known for having spearheaded the development health sector strategic plans, reviews, and evaluations, in addition to leading work globally in health policy, financing, costing, efficiency, effectiveness, and also universal health care. She currently plays a key role in facilitating the East Africa Community's Sustainable Health Financing Agenda, as well as being a global advisor on healthcare sustainable financing initiatives. Regina holds a Master of Arts degree in Public Administration and Economics, as well as a Bachelor of Arts degree in Anthropology. Regina, look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For a moment, I was like, is that me? Okay. So that's me. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Regina. I am actually going to speak to you about the East Africa Community Initiative, which was basically domiciled from what was agreed upon by the heads of state at the African Union side event meeting. So I would not have slides because I really want all of you to look into my eyes as I speak. So in 2019, the month of February, there was an African leaders meeting on the sidelines of the African Union meeting, where the African Union meeting was basically discussing the role of human capital development in Africa. And the heads of states and government agreed that human capital development is actually the cornerstone of economic growth in Africa that is sustainable. So in this side event where the heads of state met, they actually said, if we are to develop the human capital development in our continent, then we also have to invest heavily in health. Unfortunately, the health sector in most of the African countries is highly dependent on external resourcing. So the heads of state said, going forward, looking at the way the funding landscape is changing globally, it is actually very important for the continent to start thinking about domestic investments in health. So they pushed for the agenda for increased domestic investments in health. And in that meeting, they came out with 10 commitments. The first commitment was that African nations must increase domestic investments in health. And it's not only just increasing, but also ensuring that they track how much that increase is happening over time. The second commitment was that after every 2 years, the ministers for health and the ministers of finance of the continent must meet to review the progress made in this. The third commitment was that they needed now to start developing proper tools for tracking. So there was already a scorecard that was already indicating how much resources are put, but they now said this scorecard needs to be complemented with a tracker. The fourth commitment is that the African heads of state agreed there must be coherence in the investments in health in Africa. Because the investments are coming from different sources, they must be aligned to the priorities of the African nations. And so if it is development partners, if it is civil society, if it is private sector, their investments must be coherent and must be aligned to the priorities of the plans of the African nations in health. They also agreed that there needs to be a better engagement of the private sector in healthcare service delivery. So they really pushed that going forward, we really need to unlock the potential of the private sector so that it complements what the public sector is doing in health service delivery. They also agreed that going forward, they must enhance the capacities and capabilities of the ministries of finance to actually do more in the area of integrating the public finance management systems. In addition to that, they also agreed that going forward, they must start looking at the issue of value for money, more so around the efficiency in resources that are used for healthcare service delivery. So we must check on the strategic use of the resources that we put in health. They pushed going forward, we really have, as African nations, we really have to enhance the health financing reforms, particularly the effectiveness of healthcare service delivery, with a focus more around pushing for universal health coverage and also financial protection. And finally, they agreed that with technology coming in, all these things really need to be disseminated very quickly through digitalization so that information is also shared and widely accepted. So from those 10 commitments, the African Union agreed that the AUDA NEPAD was going to be tasked with the responsibility of implementing of these commitments. And these commitments were to be implemented through the regional economic communities for the region. And this is the East Africa Community, the Southern, the Western, the Central, and the Northern. So I'll speak about what the East Africa Community has done in this space, because that is where I am actually domiciled. So for the East Africa Community, to start off first, we agreed that we must have a dialogue with the partner states around this issue of health financing. And so they piloted 3 countries, that was Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi. And these countries carried out high-level dialogues. Originally, the design was to have these dialogues just put in a workshop format where everybody comes, we agree, and we tick the boxes and go. But we changed the design and said we must have a pre-dialogue meeting with the different stakeholders before we do the national dialogue. So we met all the different stakeholders, be it the private sector, government officials, development partner, academia, the media, the parliamentarians, and discussed with them the importance of this issue. And each of these stakeholders came out with position papers, which were then presented during the high-level dialogue. And each of the 3 countries came out with commitments that they want to follow through. Now, this dialogue, the way we structured it, was very resource-heavy. And we were getting our support mainly from the Gates Foundation and also the Global Fund. So we completed these dialogues, and recommendations were made from this dialogue, which were presented to the Sectoral Council at the EAC. And from this Sectoral Council meeting, the EAC approved that we need to continue with the rest of the countries in undertaking these dialogues. As I'd indicated, we are now planning to undertake dialogues in Uganda and Tanzania, and then we will also see how we'll undertake dialogues in South Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo, because these are also members of the East Africa community. But as I indicated, these dialogues are very resource heavy, so they will really require a lot of support. But why am I giving you all this story here? I'm giving you all this story here because I actually see there's a lot of collaboration that can happen in these spaces working with universities. And therefore, I'm reaching out to actually say there are areas that we picked out in this whole exercise that we feel with strong collaboration with universities, we can actually be more impactful. One area is in the operationalization of the regional hubs that we are setting up. We're really looking forward to the expertise from the universities to join in with us as the East Africa community to help us get the hub, the East Africa Community Hub, operational around health financing, so that it becomes a nexus for knowledge sharing, for peer-to-peer learning, and also for other research work around health financing within the region. We are also looking up to you as universities to work with us in this area of data, because we need a lot of data on health financing, and how it is collected, collated, and interpreted will require the expertise that you have in the universities to work with us, so that the data that we collect and work around health financing can be data that can be used to inform policy going forward. We mentioned about the metric tools that we are using, the tracker, the scorecard, and the expenditure reviews work that we are doing. We would really like to collaborate with the universities so that our tools are actually tools that can actually deliver on the information that is needed to help inform policy. So I'm reaching out to you in this session to collaborate with us as a regional bloc so that we start engaging and getting to work together to push this agenda of sustainable financing for health in the East Africa region and beyond, with your help, so that we are able to deliver on what works for Africa going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Regina. So we come to our third speaker, who is Professor Yosua Dambisya. He is a medical graduate of Makerere University in Uganda and a clinical pharmacologist at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He's Director General of the East, Central and Southern Africa Health Community, has been since 2014. Prior to joining this community, he was a senior professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Limpopo in South Africa, and a visiting professor, at the Management and Science University in Malaysia. Professor Dambisya has also previously worked at the University of Transkei Medical School in South Africa, the National University of Singapore, and Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. His research interests include health systems and policy, education of health professionals, pain, natural products, equity in health and equitable access to healthcare services, and rational drug utilization. Professor Dambisia, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. This WUN and WUN President's Forum. Thank you for the privilege to address you this afternoon. I come from the East Central Southern Africa Health Community, which is 50 years old this year, having grown out of the Commonwealth Secretariat mechanisms, initially as the Regional Health Secretariat of the Commonwealth for East Central and Southern Africa. We have 9 member states presently, but our operational footprint spreads to 26 countries within Africa at the moment. We are a regional intergovernmental health organization that fosters a regional collaboration on all matters of health. I stand here partly to explain the way we operate and how that partly presents opportunities for interface between universities, academic institutions, research institutions, and ourselves as an intergovernmental organization. Our governance structure includes at the top a conference of health ministers that makes the ultimate decisions on behalf of the organization. The Conference of Health Ministers is advised by a committee made up of permanent or principal secretaries. That is the advisory committee. But on technical matters, we have the Directors' Joint Consultative Committee. That includes deans or principals of health faculties from some of the universities within our member states. It includes heads of health-specific research institutes within the member states. It includes the directors or director general, as the case may be, of health services within the ministries. And it also incorporates the leadership of our colleges of health sciences. And I noticed one of the participants in the room is a fellow of our College of Surgeons. And nice to meet you. So that Directors' Joint Consultative Committee provides a very good interface among the various components of these stakeholders. We have a secretariat which I've been privileged to head over the last few years, and the secretariat is in addition advised by expert committees and communities of practice that help shape the priorities for our programming. Among the things that we have institutionalized over the years is a best practices forum, which was, the idea came through the need expressed by the member states for capacities and mechanisms for evidence-informed and evidence-guided decision-making. And so, annually, except for the disruptions due to COVID, we bring together researchers not only from our member states, but from the rest of our networks to present their findings of recent research and formulate recommendations. These recommendations then are progressed to the Directors' Joint Consultative Committee, They go through them, and if they are sound, and if they are viable, if they are feasible, they are then recommended to the Health Ministers' Conference. So there is a pathway from research to policy dialogue and ultimate decision making. Briefly, that is how we are structured, that's how we operate, that's where some of the opportunities come from. We are guided by strategic plans. Our new strategic plan is embargoed until the third week of next month, when it will be launched by the Health Ministers' Conference. Suffice to note that within our new 10-year strategic plan, there are 4 areas that, as I listen to what was being said this morning, I think will be very important for us to take note of. We have emphasis on human capital development. One of our strategic plans speaks clear about building the human resources for health capacity within the region. We also have a focus on health system strengthening. And when my sister was talking about health financing, that fits there quite clearly. But we also have a strategic objective on strategic partnerships and collaboration. The issues that we are talking about, equitable partnership, are captured therein. And then the whole area of knowledge generation, management, and utilization, which speaks for or to the knowledge to policy influence cycle. I should now like to give an example of one of the ways we have worked, and I wish to acknowledge in this sense our colleagues from University of York, Makerere University, and the Kamuzu University of Health Sciences in Malawi, that partnered under the Tanzi project, and have worked quite effectively within the EXA mechanisms. They have set up a community of practice. As offshoots, there is a policy, there is a health economics policy unit in Malawi. There is a health economics and policy platform at Makerere. And these are collectively helping to build the pool of health financing experts, health economists and health financing experts. The institutionalization of that collaboration through a community of practice has helped build the capacity within ourselves as a secretariat, but also individually in the various institutions that are involved. Perhaps a case of the sum being bigger than the constituent parts. So that's one example. The other one on human capacity development is the collegiate model of training specialists that we adopted. And as I indicated, there is one colleague here wearing a tie as a fellow of the College of Surgeons. Now, through these mechanisms, we now have 9 specialist colleges, various specialties, including surgery, nursing, midwifery, anesthesiology, physicians, oncology, and so on and so forth. What is exemplar about this approach is the fact that within a few years we have, Sorry about that. Some of the reflexes do not listen when told to shut up. Yeah, so we have contributed to the pool of experts, specialists in many of our countries, and this is in a bid to. Okay. Okay. It's in a bid to bridge the gap in the human resource capacity within our region. As we are aware, though the data is dated, Africa, though having the highest disease burden, has about 3% of the skilled health workforce. But there are also other issues that we are beginning to take on board, because even where we have helped improve the numbers, the absorption is limited. And this is now where the groups that are taking on health economics, health financing, and policy will be instrumental in guiding our national responses, because the need is there, the fiscal space is not there. In addition to the groups I've mentioned, there is also the opportunity for you as researchers to interface with parliamentarians. Extra Health Community, through some of its collaborations with other sectors, was instrumental in the establishment of the network of parliamentary committees of health in Africa, NEAPACO, Network of African Parliamentary Committees on Health. And this network meets every year, and it brings together chairs and vice chairs, sometimes other members of parliamentary committees on health. And it's a very interesting meeting, the NEAPACO annual general meeting, because the members of parliament are taken through their critical role and how they ought to approach the fight for resources towards the health sector. And so this is another avenue where you as researchers with evidence could stand a chance to influence those who make the final decisions on resource allocations. Mr. Chairman, allow me stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Dambisia. So we've heard from our three speakers, and I now invite questions, comments from our audience. You may pose your question generally, or you may wish to direct it to one of our speakers as you wish. Do we have a hand? Yes, please, Peggy. The mic's coming.
Thank you very much. My first question is to the first speaker on the SDGs. Just to find out if you're linked with the UN DESA of the STI for the SDGs, because we're not catching up as Africa, whether or not you are, involved in that. The second question I have is to the two speakers. How are you linking up with the established known models, like models that, talked about in universities and also in academies? You know, are you, linking up with that? And the last one, it's, yes, we're producing a lot of the health workers, in all the areas that you have identified. How do we make sure that they have a continuous training, that they don't go out, well, they could go out, but ensure that they have continuous training, and also linking on like the models we have in terms of the post-doctoral training, in terms of north-south, south-south, or triangular, collaboration in training, because the health system is changing very fast. We may not have all that, we have in the East Africa or the others. How do we get about it? And why have we isolated North Africa?
Thank you. Mano, do you want to go first?
I can go first. Thanks for the question. We didn't engage with many other institutions that are involved in SDGs. As I said, SDGs were not our point of departure. It was more about African development and challenges on the continent. But as we were concluding that project, we did engage with the UN Secretariat. Actually, the foreword is written by the UN Secretariat. We didn't directly engage with that. And that's point to the next step that I alluded to at the end is what next? How do we use these findings to engage with institutions that are dealing with this? Rwanda has the hub on SDGs, for example. And so there is no connections between and among people who are working on SDGs in Africa, and even institutions. And this raises an important question about whether the way we have responded or tackled the SDGs has impacted on our organizational design intellectually, has impacted on how we bring in different role players, thinkers on these issues and policymakers together. So that for me is the next step to say this is the situation now. And if somebody had a slush fund and say, Mana, this is a slush fund, I would say the next question is, how have institutions dealing with SDGs been impacted by this? How have they been transformed? And so are the scholars and universities as well. So that's how I'm thinking about this, to answer your question.
Thank you. Regina?
Yeah, thank you, Peggy, for your question. I just want to clarify here that the meeting for the African leaders happened in 2019, where the issue of sustainable health financing was brought to the fore. Between 2019 and the whole exercise around starting the dialogues for discussions around what do we do from a regional perspective, took off basically in 2023. So you can see there was already a lull between 2019 and 2023. That's when we had the first dialogues in Kenya and Rwanda, and then this year in February we did it in Burundi. And the East Africa community just said, let's pilot first with the 3 countries, and we see if we can scale up with the others. So during this session of dialogues, that's when all this information and ideas around what the countries want as ways of ensuring sustainability in the health financing agenda for their countries need to be taken into consideration. Now, these dialogues brought in all stakeholders, including even representation from universities, so that they can discuss, deliberate, and agree on what pathway they think the countries should take on. I am coming into this meeting today to actually express that kind of thing happening, and reaching out to you all as universities to start also thinking and help me think through how best can we collaborate, how best can we work together so that all these things that we are doing in this area through your research, how can it be an added advantage to the work that I'm doing so that it brings out better results and better outcomes in that space of health financing? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll touch upon the question related to the training, the need for continuous training, collaboration. Just to indicate that we have already built in mechanisms for continuous professional development, not only of the graduates of these various collegiate programs, but of the people in the sites at which the training happens. So that is taken care of. We have also built in an aspect of south-to-south collaboration. For instance, we have very strong collaboration with our sister colleges in West Africa, with the colleges of medicine in South Africa, and during the examinations and subsequent graduation, we literally bring the whole world together. So that brings in the element of quality control and assurance, but also ensuring that the links and networks are fostered across the globe. And we have excellent examples, particularly with the College of Surgeons, where during our last graduation in Addis Ababa at the end of last year, we had about 230 external examiners attending and examining the students. So we do have that. I should not attempt the question on North Africa, because you might be better placed to answer that one than I am.
Thank you very much. Question there.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for this chance. My question goes to Regina. You called for the university work together with the East Africa community, especially on data on health. How do you want us work with you? Do you want us work on research, or to work together to develop systems for data on research collection? My name is Nelson Boniface from the University of Dar es Salaam. Additionally, this is a curious one. On the sixth commitment of the heads of state of East African community, you mentioned on enhancement of ministers on capabilities and the capacities. Is that working? Because ministers keep on changing. The curious question.
Regina?
Oh, okay. Let me start with the last one. I think the last one was that commitment was enhancing the ministries of finance capabilities, not the ministers. Yeah, but there was a commitment that was agreed upon for every 2 years, the ministries of health and the ministers of health and finance to meet to review on progress. Probably that could be connecting to the fact that what happens when the ministers change. But I believe institutions still remain. Even if there's a change in the ministers, if the institutions are there and they're able to move that agenda, it can still work. On the first question on the data on health, and basically, I'm very biased. My work is on health financing. So the data that I'm talking about is in relation to aspects of health financing, where we are actually saying, how can we collaborate with you, universities, to really help us strengthen that data piece that we have? Because it is that data piece that we use at the ESC to make those policy decisions. And we want data that can actually be tested and found to be sound and solid. So we have already a health financing tracker in place this was developed by a different entity. And I think in Peggy's presentations, he said, you know, we really need to check on these systems that we are using that are being developed for us. Do we understand them? Are we able to work with them? So we really want to start working with universities to help us actually see the viability of these tools and systems that we are being introduced to, so that we either see whether they are adaptable to what we are trying to work with. Can they help us get that information that is needed? We also need a lot of support from you, particularly now that we are pushing the UHC agenda and there's so much around insurance, financial protection. Can we really capitalize on the comparative advantage that universities have in this area of research to help us do some real sound research work and give us results that can now help us on this other end to make informed decisions? So basically, capitalizing on that comparative advantage that you have as universities for evidence generation to really help us make some informed decisions. There are some decisions we make on this side which are not informed very well, and they end up messing up everyone. So we're actually saying we have an opportunity now to start collaborating, partnering, because we've given you what we do, how we are placed, so how can we now use your expertise to make our outcome even better?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Please, yeah, please.
Thank you. He mentioned capacities of ministers and how they change very often. EXA Health Community has over the years developed a global health diplomacy training for ministers and senior officials. And actually the starting point was the point he raised, that the lifespan of ministers in our region is between 6 and 9 months. Some stay longer, but on average, hardly more than 1 year overall. So there is need for continuous training. Due to COVID disruptions, we haven't had these sessions for the last 3 or so years, but they were quite useful, especially in preparing the ministers for the World Health Assembly, which is the premier global health diplomacy forum. So we look forward to reactivating them and ensuring that we equip our top leadership in the ministries with the relevant negotiation skills. Because when you get to Geneva for the World Health Assembly, you have a delegation of 3 ministers from country X. The US and China each have about 500. There is no way the 3 of you will be everywhere, and you end up coming home with decisions that have been made where you were, but you weren't there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, of course, there is perhaps greater stability of ministries than ministers.
Yes.
Which we must be aware of. Any further questions? If while there's a gap, could I just make a remark and perhaps pose a question as well? It's more of a remark, and it's really around the various perspectives concerning funding, shall we say, of research activities that have emerged in all of your presentations. So, Mana, you've talked about slush funds. I don't think you'll see that in the audited financial statements, but nevertheless. But the point I want to make is the following, and it's really a point which has not emerged in our discussions in the course of today, around the funding, the resourcing of research or generally, and of collaborative research in particular, and funding that is directed in such a way as to promote equitable collaborative research. So there are certainly some quite laudable collaborative efforts on the African continent, such as the Science Granting Council's initiative for Sub-Saharan Africa. But it's very interesting, I think, to note also the efforts by funders, well, in the global north. For example, in the European Union, through its Horizon and other programs, where there is very, very explicit motivation, shall we say, for EU researchers, in fact, to seek out partners, shall we say, in the global south, in the course of their project proposals. So here one has an example which I think really emphasizes the point that funding councils have the ability, in fact, through the way in which they steer their funding, to facilitate and to promote collaborative research across, between the global north and the global south, and in fact to not simply to seek partners from different parts of the world, but also to ensure that the manner in which they go about their research is equitable. It's just a thought that I thought I'd convey. Anything else? If there are no further comments or questions, well, by way of summing up, we've had some very interesting and quite diverse perspectives here on and examples of successful collaborations, which by and large have not been of, shall we say, the straight research type collaboration. They have been multi-sectoral in different ways, and so that, I think, has presented to us some very interesting examples and insights, crossing sectors, and we heard just a moment ago, an explicit comment about, in the case of your work, Regina, the role of universities, given the kind of expertise that the university sector can bring to a project of your nature. We've also, of course, had a further example of the collaboration between universities and intergovernmental institutions, and along the way, references to the role of the private sector. So these, I think, are all, they provide very useful lessons to us. They also provide examples to us of the, shall we say, of the multitude of forms that cross-sectoral or transdisciplinary research initiatives could take. I thought it was also interesting, Mano, to hear your views on, well, how, in a sense, you addressed the issue of ensuring that the participation in your project was well and truly equitable, not only with regard to how the work was conducted, but also with regard to the numbers and the scope and the range of participants from African countries would be, shall we say, properly represented. So you started off with your 3 African nodes, but then via your regional hubs were able to bring in the others. So I think in that and the other examples that we've heard from our speakers today, there surely is food for thought and points made that provide some that would give us some, shall we say, points of departure with regard to how we construct these kinds of collaborations in the first instance. In other words, going beyond, what we all agree about, that is about sharing and participating, co-creating, participating together in agenda setting and the like. We all know that, but what does it really mean with regard to this or that research project? And here we've heard some examples which to some extent add to, shall we say, the more traditional forms of research collaboration. So this has been a very interesting and informative session, and I'd like to thank our colleagues who've posed questions as well. Those have been also very interesting and have elicited some responses that have provided additional insights. And I think it's worth emphasizing, as the title of this session indicates, that we do have to talk about the problems that we face in building successful collaborations. But that said, there are indeed examples of such collaborations, and there are lessons that we can draw on from those. So with that, thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you.